Okay. Hey folks, I'm Scott Miller. This is IT Rockstars. This is where we help IT businesses and MSPs grow their business. On today's show, we've got a pretty cool guest that has an extensive career in the MSP space. He ran his own MSP for like over a decade, and then he went to work in the vendor space. He went and worked for SolarWinds of all places. So we can ask him really interesting questions about that. But that's actually not the reason we've got him on the show today. Really having a sort of year in review, what 2019 has been like in the MSP space. This guy, Dave Sobel, he knows the space very well. He runs a couple of podcasts, the Killing It IT podcast and MSP radios. Welcome to the show, Dave. How are you doing?
Thanks for having me, Scott. I'm great. We are rounding out the year. This is that slow time where we get to take stock a little bit. But I have to laugh. We were saying right before we came on, like us as content generators, it's like this is the quiet time where we have to keep producing stuff. So
yeah,
so we're cranking away.
And it's a difficult time of year because you can be there's a lot more fun things to be doing than this sitting at the desk, isn't there? So the first question I've got for you, Dave.
Yes.
SolarWinds. You were there for how many years? 8 or 9 years?
Yeah, well, I was a vendor for 8. I started at a company called Level Platforms after I sold my MSP, and then we sold that business to AVG, and I helped to, people might know, GFI, which became Logic Now, which was acquired by SolarWinds. So that portion of my career was a 6-year run at that vendor, and it was fun because you went from that kind of eager startup to being acquired all the way through IPO. So I had a really great learning experience as we took the company public, and then I felt like it had reached sort of the end of that run, and I was ready to do something else. So, but yeah. Good 6-year run there, plus 2 more years at Level, making me a vendor for 8 years.
What was the type of thing you did at SolarWinds?
So I did a lot of the community engagement, so built out the way that we communicated with our customers, particularly during the GFI and Logic Now days, was the way that we interacted with our customers, the way we educated our customers. People, the visible portion of that, people might have seen all of the trade shows we did, the Max conferences, and which then became the Empower conferences, all of that work, our road teams, but it was also a lot of the educational bits. So helping people be a better MSP, the marketing materials and the training materials and all of the stuff that people might want to use. Those were the programs that I helped build out. The last bit of time I was at SolarWinds, I was actually doing a bunch of strategy work. Where's the industry going? What technologies might make a lot of sense? People always say like the M&A work. So who SolarWinds might purchase. I was involved in a lot of those pieces.
From that sort of community building side for maybe vendors in the space at the moment, and this is probably doesn't appeal to my audience, this question, but there might be vendors watching this on YouTube or listening in. Is there things at SolarWinds that you've done that completely flopped, and things that you've learned they're building that community aspect that work really well, or where you can see sort of the market going, what's maybe missing in the market at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, the answer is of course there were things that flop because you have to try things to be innovative and to move in new directions. You got to try things, and you got to be willing to let things fail. I definitely say that while I viewed a lot of the programs as super success, if I dig into even within, like, say for example, any of the Max events, there were sessions that I thought were a great idea that the response was really bad. Like, it's like, okay, that clearly didn't work, or that didn't get the appeal. But you got to try things. And I think I could always sum it down to the programs that worked the best were always the ones where we had a definitive outcome of where we thought the MSP would get value, and we could measure that. Anytime that we knew there was something about doing that would drive some additional value, that program always ended up being the most successful. The ones that were less successful tended to be the ones where we thought it was a good idea, but we were going to struggle to understand if we could figure out the measurement. And we sort of said, okay, we're going to try it anyway to see what happens. They never quite worked as well as we might have hoped.
Okay, so it was almost like a goal that you had in mind that you could actually measure. Okay, that's a really good bit of advice there. So that brings us nicely linking to the reason you're on the show today, and that is specifically for MSPs. It was a roundup of the year of technology in the MSP space, where you see we've kind of come in the last year and where you think we may be going from an MSP provider. And
Yeah.
I've got some interesting questions around that, but I'd like to hear what your take is on it.
Yeah, so it's an interesting time in this space because I think I can I've done a ton of research and I've looked back at where we're at from a marketplace, and I get asked a lot of time, like, has the market matured, or is it still maturing? And my answer these days is yes. And it's both. We're actually in a market that has matured a lot. When we look at the demographics of MSPs, they have gotten to the point where they are comfortable delivering their services. They understand how to execute. We've got a real stability to the marketplace. I know that 20% of the market is going to be best in class MSPs. Like, that's been pretty level for about 8 years. I know that the majority of that are in that middle maturity tier that they're going to be executing and continuing to develop their business, and there's room for profitability growth there. And that's what I mean by the fact that I say, like, hey, there's room to grow, because I'm seeing, like, there's still room for profitability to grow.
So where do you see the low-hanging fruit in regards to room to grow your MSP?
Well, there are areas right now that I think are massive in terms of what customers need from a security perspective and how you can help them be better. I think that the vendors, and having been one for a long time, will tell you that buy my security product and you've solved the problem. Sure, okay, great. But that's not where I actually think the opportunity is. I think the opportunity really is in those services that help customers really deliver security and do it ongoing, and move into the even smarter business outcomes driven stuff where we're talking to them about how they're using data. The big thing that I see thematically when I look at kind of technology as a whole, and I cover a lot of this on my news podcast, the Business of Tech. Big tech is getting a ton of attention, and they're kind of sucking all the oxygen out of the room from a technology perspective, because in my mind, they're making a real mess of privacy. Yeah. They're making a real mess of data management. They're making a real mess of privacy. They're constantly under attack. I mean, go find me a Facebook, story of where they did something today. It's easy. But what this is doing is this is actually causing a lot of customers to start thinking about technology in a more negative sense. And I think there's opportunity for solution providers, for MSPs, to go out and say, Mr. Customer, I'm going to talk to you about how you use your data, how your data is being captured, how you're how you're collecting data on your own customers. We're going to make sure that not only are you secure, i.e. we're going to keep you from getting hacked, ransomware attacks, all of those kinds of big things. But we're also going to talk to you about the ethical way we're going to handle your data and how we're going to make sure that we're keeping your customer data private. For example, I'm Scott, you're UK based. Yeah. GDPR is a big deal across Europe because it has a framework for customer, management. We've all spent all this time talking about kind of like the minimal data requirements of it, in terms of getting people to GDPR compliance. I think the next generation of that, where the real opportunity is let's go into the spirit of these laws and these privacy laws and help customers do the right thing with their data. Are you mining just enough? Not everything, but just the right stuff. Are you protecting it well, and are you doing right by your customers? Tons of opportunity here.
So from an MSP's perspective, I'll go with what my perspective is.
Sure.
Worked in an MSP, had my own MSP. I'm a techie guy. I love technology. I'm into infrastructure. I was desktop support, went on to server engineer, then senior systems engineer. From this whole data thing and classification and protection on data, that's just not something that, I'm happy looking at a Windows event log on a server, but when it comes to this whole data topic, where would an MSP start on that? Is there somewhere that they can go? Is there a template or something that they can go and say, hey, customer, you need to spend more money because this is a big problem and this is what we're going to do for you?
Yeah, I wish I could wave a magic wand and make it like, here's the download template. And by the way, this is what the vendors will say is, buy my product and I've solved the problem. Yeah. It's hard. But by the way, the reason this stuff is important is because it's hard. I like to always highlight, in mystery, there is margin. You can make money on the things that are hard.
Okay.
If it wasn't hard, everyone would be doing it and they would not need your services.
Yeah, it's a higher barrier to entry. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and so I look and say, look, this isn't just to download some product and solve the problem. This is, you're going to have to invest some time into understanding how businesses work, building, thinking about the way you're going to do this and building out the data management skill set. But this is critically important. Let me highlight some data that TechIsle published around the way this is positioned, because I like to say, like, the trusted advisor is dead. The idea of I'm just going to give you good technical advice and you're going to buy things, that's past. And here's why. Right now, 61% of all channel companies, so that's MSPs, technologists, resellers, like anybody that's selling in there, are transforming their organizations to focus on business outcomes. What we mean by that is they're transforming that they will measure success based on the outcome that the customer has. Can I reduce your cost? Can I improve your revenue? Can I accelerate your growth? Some tangible business piece. And this is good. The good news is this is up. 42% of customers or of channel partners were doing this 3 years ago. But the problem is 78% of customers expect this. Okay. Our customers are already ahead of us in terms of the way they want us to measure success. They are expecting that when we come in there and we talk infrastructure, that in our minds, we're measuring our own success by one of those criteria. Did I drive revenue? Did I save cost? Did I improve profitability? All of these kind of business outcomes, customers are ahead of us. So you've got to transform. I wish it was as simple as, hey, I can continue to do infrastructure and I'm going to keep machines running and that's going to just be forever. Customers have moved beyond that. Yeah. And they have definitely moved into this area of thinking much more about business outcomes. Okay,
so it's a technology investment and they want measurable, something that they can track and what the outcomes are. And
exactly. They want to know that when I spend $1, £1, €1, am I getting 2 back? Am I getting 3 back? Am I getting 5 back? What am I getting for that spend?
Are we then almost scratching on the surface here of digital transformation, helping a company transform digitally into something else? Or is this...
So I'm smiling because...
Is this like a stepping stone to that? Or?
Yeah, I'm smiling because I hate the phrase digital transformation, and I suspected you were going to poke me at this. So for those that aren't familiar, digital transformation is the idea that companies will have to go through this using digital technologies. They will transform their business processes. It's a legitimate idea, but I hate the buzzword. And the reason I hate the buzzword is because I think companies like to latch on to the fact that if you do a digital transformation, you then reach the end and you're done. And my statement is technology is always changing. Technology is something you always need to be driving into. We didn't talk about the steam revolution and it was a steam transformation, that steam engines moved everything. No, we talked about technology taking us on this arc of growth. Business has changed. You've got to do this. Yes, you're going to be investing in technology and you're going to change sections of the way that you do business. It is a digital transformation, but what I don't want people to get hung up on this is thinking that I will do this transformation once and I am done, because that's not what it is. It's just you're going to continually do
process. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why I get sort of like, hey, I have a chief digital transformation officer. I'm like, come on, this is garbage. That person is the chief technology officer, and they should have been doing it the whole time.
Okay, that makes sense. So what do you think of then the term digital optimization? Is that maybe lend itself better?
I don't, for me, this is all in our industry trying to latch on to buzzwords to make it sound cool.
Language and terminology. Okay.
Yeah, so you'd mentioned the Killing It podcast. Like that's the one that I do every week where we're actually discussing these things. And the reason we started that podcast was around we as technologists get all hung up on these phraseology. And I think the terms, get in the way many times because we're so hung up on what the terms mean and not worrying about what the customer really needs in the end. Is it digital optimization? Sure. Is it digital transformation? Sure. I don't really care as long as you're using technology to drive business outcomes. Call it whatever you want. Just focus on that.
So it's the customer first. Cool. Okay, so that's 2019.
Yep.
Where are we going in the future with technology? 2020, what do you think it's going to bring us? And what big changes do you think are going to happen in the space?
Yeah, so I think security is going to get worse before it gets better. And I hate to sort of say that, but it just seems that way when I'm covering, and looking at all of the kinds of incidents that I see. It's too much, and
MSPs seem to be a target at the moment.
They are definitely a target. We still have a thinking that the attackers are this random, disorganized, kids on the internet style thing, when it is truly targeted attacks that are happening across all sizes of infrastructure and all sizes of business. I'm working, as we're recording this, I'm working on, today's news podcast. I have 4 ransomware stories to update on just today. 2 of which involving massive lawsuits based on based on some level of negligence or damages. 1 where there's a massive release of private data from a city, and the 4th where the company is likely going out of business. And these are all very targeted attacks, not random drive-by kind of stuff. These are criminals coming in trying to make an impact. I think this problem is going to get worse. Now, I will always look at that and say, look, that meaning of difficulty in mystery, there is margin. Good solution providers are the ones that are going to be going out with their customers, and they're going to make sure that they're investing in the right things. Helping customers do 2-factor authentication and maybe even physical security keys, and helping with policies and helping with training. But this is not you'll buy one product and be done, or here's my 2 or 3 security products and I'm done. The solution provider, the MSP, is going to have to get really good at services and really focus on this.
So one of the things we've got here in the UK, Dave, you might have heard of it, it's called Cyber Essentials. It's an accreditation that any business can get, any size of business can get, and it kind of brings them up to a certain level. And that is things like making sure your 2-factor authentication is turned on your devices, and minimal access on your domain controller, and all that type of thing. And it's accreditation. It is literally just a piece of paper that you can get very easily, but there's a plus version where someone is actually, a third party looks at your policies, your procedures, and your security. Is there anything in the States that you're aware of that's similar to that?
Yeah, the NIST cybersecurity framework is similar here in the U.S. Australia has one as well. The EU has a framework. So all of these are I laugh and go, oh, they're all great in that if you use one, you're starting to invest in that. And Cybersecurity Essentials in the UK is a fantastic program. I've spent a lot of time looking at the NIST cybersecurity framework. You can give it away my accent. I'm American, so I've spent time on that. CompTIA has aligned around the NIST cybersecurity framework, so that helps in terms of the way they're looking at it. So there are a lot of these that I think are great frameworks that someone can use. It's important to point out this is not a product. This is a system and a set of ideas and things you implemented as an MSP to help get to that baseline.
Do you think if security breaches are going to get worse before they get better, do you think having these frameworks maybe the governments will actually put these into some form of legislation?
I think it's coming. You can see it. I mean, even literally today, as we're recording this in the U.S., the Department of Homeland Security has drafted a directive to talk around cybersecurity disclosure. So that is one of the things in the framework. Today they're looking at actually, a framework around that. I think we're going to start seeing a lot more government regulation come into our space. It's one of the topics that I've been talking about a lot on my podcast, and the reason is because I think we as technologists have been a little too hands-off with regulation. We've let the big companies handle it. We've let the governments themselves handle it. But if you look at small business, 80% of all business, 85% of all businesses, a real vast majority of all businesses are small businesses, and they're being served by small IT providers.
Yeah.
We're the front lines of this. We should be the ones also contributing to what the minimum standards are. And I think we need to not only be more aware of this, we need to be providing feedback back. My scary stat of the week from this kind of perspective is, and this is an American stat, but I think this is true in most governments, only about 4% of elected officials at the federal level in the US have any kind of STEM background at all, any kind of technology background. 4%. So are we expecting them to be the ones that pass legislation and regulation that makes sense? I would start from even with the best of intentions. Let's assume all politicians come up from a perfect place of intention, right? They're not necessarily equipped with the knowledge to understand what they're regulating. We've got to be part of the process, and we have to be part of the solution as the people that do this.
Okay. All right. That makes a lot of sense to me. So, probably onto something else, Dave. We've touched on these 2 points about data and security. What we haven't touched about, your podcast, The Business of Tech, which you push out daily, which is an achievement, an amazing achievement. I think you mentioned you've been doing it since September. I couldn't imagine doing a podcast every day from September. But give us some cool tech. From 2020, what do you think? What tech do you think in business is going to really blow up? You got any ideas there at all?
Well, so and thank you for the compliment. It's a 5-minute podcast. So for those that are saying like, oh my God, I don't want to listen to an hour a day of content, it's 5 minutes a day. So it's designed to give you news and commentary of what you need to know that day. What I think, I wish I could sort of say like there was some single cool tech that I'm anticipating in 2020. The answer is that I'm not anticipating any single thing. I'm expecting lots of incremental changes that are going to move really fast. The big thing technology-wise that I think we're going to see in 2020 is 5G. I think I have to highlight that as the beginning of a next wave of technology. 5G will roll out. We will start seeing the first devices in widespread use, and we're going to see a real jump in capabilities. We're not going to understand the impact of that for another year or 2 or 3 or more beyond that, but the capabilities are going to be there. When you look at a potential 10 times leap in bandwidth that'll be rolled out, I can see people designing networks and devices very differently.
Yeah, that's the feeling. I thought I put a video out last year on this, on 5G and how it's going to change completely the way things like devices and networks are managed. And
right, if it's faster just to throw something on the public internet rather than put it on a private network, why wouldn't you? And it's going to also create all these new classes of devices that can be out and about, like just anywhere in the world, and easy to connect to. We're seeing lots of the low voltage connections come in, the ease of connectivity in these devices being augmented. I think we're going to see a lot of that. I'm not necessarily sure we're going to see it in 2020, but the possibilities will now be there for that to happen, and it'll be that hockey stick growth as it grows going out. So for me, the big thing is 5G. Obviously, security underlies everything because we're going to see a lot more of that. But I don't think we're going to see a massive single thing, but we're going to see a lot of things get a lot better. We're seeing voice get a lot better. We're seeing drones around. I think we're going to start seeing a ton more interesting applications of drones and robots and automation really hit. They're going to start coming out in some interesting ways, and we as technologists are going to have to start working with that.
Cool. Okay. So usually when I have someone on the podcast, before we hit record, I always ask them the question, how could this be a win for you? What is there a question that you want me to ask in the podcast? We're going to be just doing that live here, Dave. Is there something that you want to get across to our audience here, IT rock stars, that I haven't asked?
My big thing these days is I really want to start challenging people to start thinking a little differently. And the reason is that this is a mature market. We've gotten pretty good at this, at technology delivery. And in a mature market, you've got to do some things to make sure that you are still relevant and that you are still able to deliver in that space. It's not going to be just about the latest, greatest thing or keeping it all just, all coming together. We talked about like the change of infrastructure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because the reason that I'm starting to promote and talk about things like ethics and data management and regulation is we are in that space where the market is really maturing, tech is growing up. Those are the issues that really hit when you're in that level of maturity, and we're going to have to embrace them. If we don't embrace them, they're going to roll over us. And so for me, like, the big thing that I always say is the why, what I would have told you to ask me is, Dave, why are you doing this? Why are you thinking this way? Is because, hey, we've been at this for a while. I look at my own career. I was an MSP for a decade. Then I was a vendor for 8 years. I'm seeing the same patterns. That's telling me that the market is matured, that there's a lot going on here. I laugh and go, one of my rules to myself was I would never sit in another pricing panel again. And anybody who's been doing technology goes for a while, like, we have these circular discussions. Well, what do you charge? How do you price your services? What are the bundles? This is well-worn territory, everybody. Yeah. The answers are available.
There's done that. Yeah.
Right.
There's a book on the topic now as well. So
I believe there's multiple books on them. This is one of those areas where, like, it's well-worn territory. Don't get me wrong. It's healthy to have that kind of conversation, particularly if you're starting out. You want to get engaged in that. But the resources are there. I remember old man Dave here for a moment. I remember when I was starting and we didn't have those resources, and we were literally reaching out to one another to try and figure this out. Now I can get started by buying a book, working through, getting it, moving quickly through that portion and get my service out there. Now let's deal with the bigger topics.
Yeah, and I think I'm in agreement there, because these topics that you bring up, people have come to me in the month of December about them, and I am still scratching my head here on some of them myself. So I guess it's something to look up for 2020 and some digging. So Dave, thanks very much for being on the show. How can people get in touch with you? You mentioned you have MSP Radio, but where's the best place to find you?
Yeah, so all of my podcasts are on mspradio.com. That's the easiest place to find it. The Business of Tech is a daily podcast. You can subscribe on every pod-catching platform you might possibly be interested in doing that. And there are links to everything there on mspradio.com. You can also find me on all the social platforms. Just search for Dave Sobel. Obviously, it's a YouTube video, so you'll see my picture pretty fast and be able to find me. I'm available that way. I love having conversations about this. The reason that I'm doing podcasting and I'm doing content this way is this, for me, is a conversation. Yeah. I don't profess to have every answer to this, and I don't profess to be right on all of it, but we have to be talking about it and thinking about it and challenging ideas. And I don't want to do the same content over and over again. As I said, I don't want to be on another pricing panel. I want to talk about something interesting.
Makes a lot of sense. Well, thanks very much, Dave. If you are looking to generate more qualified leads for your IT business, check out itrockstars.net. Remember to hit that like button, subscribe button, and we'll leave links to Dave's channels in the show notes. Take it easy, folks. Bye.